All right, so it's 3:35. I guess we can go ahead and get started. If there's anybody else who flows into the Zoom, I'll just go ahead and admit them. But hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Sabrina Kanata. I am the current Secretary of Student Engagement for SGA. I'm super excited to have all of you here today presenting this wonderful event called Daring Defenders, Women of Law. I have with me some amazing women who are either in currently law, teaching law, or are actually learning to be a woman in law. So I'm very excited for this event, and I hope all of you are just as excited as me as well. So I'd like to pass this over to either Melissa or Mariana so you guys can introduce your organization, everything that you do.
Hi, Sabrina. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Melissa Hernandez. I am a third-year political science major, and I am the current president and founder of the Empowering Women in Law chapter here at FIU. So just to tell you guys a little bit about Empowering Women in Law, it is a national organization that was founded at Michigan State University in 2018 by students Anissa Daguer and Savannah Uitema, which is really exciting because Savannah, one of our founders, actually just got admitted to Harvard Law. So that's really cool. And basically, we are an organization that act as a space for driven, like-minded students to gather and work together to achieve our law school and professional goals. We fundraise for women education and rights. We prepare for the LSAT and law school applications. We expand our professional networks. And most importantly, we learn about various career paths in the legal field and what it's like to be a woman in the field of law. So that's it for now. And I'm going to pass it on to Mariana, our treasurer.
Hi, I'm Mariana. I'm the treasurer for EWOL. And as Sabrina already said, this is a panel that we have some really great speakers. So I'm just gonna introduce them really quickly and then they can talk about themselves for a little bit and then we'll start with the questions. So our three speakers today are law student Kat Cooper. We have Professor Charhuri from FIU and another professor, Abu Kadir, that she's also a practicing lawyer. So if you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Kat Cooper. I'm a first-year law student at Berkeley. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much it for just like a quick short introduction. I can obviously get into way more detail about my application experience and my experience as a 1L right now.
You're muted.
There we go, unmute. I am Professor Saira Akila Chaudhry. I teach at FIU College of Law, where I have been teaching since 2007, and it's really nice to see a couple of my students who have come through and have graduated from FIU Law School. And I teach family law. I teach a number of seminars on property and race, and I also have taught sales and commercial law for a number of years. So, and before I came to FIU, what did I do? I practiced at Freshfields Brookhurst Derringer in their corporate finance practice, which is it is actually the largest law firm in the world and one of the oldest, if not the oldest law firm in the world. And so I have a broad variety of sort of experience in the law. I continue to practice insofar as I am an expert witness for a number of domestic relations cases, primarily divorce. So, I've had some very, very interesting experiences there. So, happy to be here, and I'm delighted that you're doing this. It's really important to continue this conversation. So look forward to hearing from others as well.
Hi, everyone. I am Professor Samah Abou-Khdayr, but I go by Sam for short, since it's a complicated name. I am also a practicing attorney. I own and manage the Florida Probate and Family Law Firm here in Miami, Florida. I practice both probate and family law, just like the name of the firm says. I also teach at the Honors College at FIU, and I am a graduate from FIU College of Law. Professor Chowdhury was one of my professors, and I was actually her teacher's assistant when I was in law school. So thank you for having me.
Okay, so I will start asking questions, but if anybody has any questions that they come up with, we are gonna have a Q&A at the end. So you can either ask the question or type it out. Okay, so my first question, this is gonna go to Kat. Beyond the LSAT and GPA, what can a student stand out? What can help a student stand out in an application?
So as I'm sure you all know, the LSAT and your GPA is pretty important when you're applying to law schools. I would say the LSAT more than the GPA, but of course we aren't numbers, we're humans. And I think what a lot of schools look at is like a strong personal statement. And in my experience, that was what allowed me to get the admissions that I did, was a strong personal statement. And a lot of law schools want to see a conviction for going to law school and like a strong reason why, and not just, you know, like, oh, I guess it was something I should do, or, you know, like I want to make money and this is how I want to do it. Like you should really have some calling or some reason to go to law school. And it could be whatever it is for you. Just make sure that it's like it's actual and you can support it, and you sound passionate when you talk about it. In addition to that, if you're gonna do like a why Berkeley or why Cornell, why Columbia, a lot of them will have that as a supplemental essay when you're applying. You should look up the schools before and then see if they have any clinics or journals, any pro bono work you could do while a student. At Berkeley Law, and this is like pretty specific to Berkeley, 1Ls are allowed to join journals, which is just like scholars submit writings and then you review them and then submit them through your college's journal. And a lot of schools like pride themselves on sort of their activities they offer to 1Ls, because usually 1Ls don't have chances like that. So you want to be able to talk about unique things the school can offer and why that appeals to you. So when I was applying to Berkeley, they have a lot of journals. Like I said, 1Ls can join journals. You can do pro bono work. And that was like really important to me when I was applying to schools, was being able to get that hands-on experience that as a 1L you don't normally get. Additionally, if you're going to apply for a diversity statement, it's hard as a diverse candidate to write a personal statement and then a diversity statement, because sometimes they can blend. And that was what I struggled with a lot in my application, was figuring out how to separate them. And so I think discussing your diversity in your personal statement is a great thing to do, but then like kind of expanding upon that in your diversity statement is going to make you a really well-rounded and strong candidate for a law school application, because it's so important, especially in America, to get more women in the law, more people of color in the law, more intersectional identities in the law. So I think if you have the chance to write a diversity statement, 100% do it. It sucks. It really sucks to use your trauma to get into like school or show how you're well-rounded, but it is so important and it is your own experience. And if you can take that and apply it to the world and make the world a little bit of a better place and show a school that you want to do that, it's totally worth it. And keep in contact with good professors or like anyone you interned for. I know it can feel like you're bothering them, or you know you don't have anything to say, but it's so important to have really good recommendations. So stay in contact with professors, people you interned for, people you worked for. Yeah, and I think that would be it for like a well-rounded application.
Thank you so much. So the next question is for Professor Chowdhury, and it is, do you feel that women are still underrepresented in your field of work?
So that's a good question, and it depends on what you mean by my field of work. So I want to talk about representation in two aspects. One is sort of in the law teaching sort of field, and people don't really think about teaching when they go to law school, but there are hundreds of law schools and they are being taught by lawyers. So this isn't something that you should discount. I'm sure that someone, when she went to school, didn't think that she was going to become a professor, but here she is. And there are, many, many people in her position that have found their way into the classroom. So the first thing is that, like, in law teaching, women as a group are not necessarily underrepresented, in the sense that, we are achieving numbers. And the question then becomes, so one, like, how are we doing in terms of retention? So it's not just enough for us to have, people represent, like women represented in their first, second, or third year of teaching, or first, second, or third year of law practice. But as you go on in the profession, are we retaining women in the more senior positions? So in the law, in the law school context, we tend to lose women as, time goes on, for a number of reasons. And we tend to lose minority women, particularly at promotion and tenure, because of many of the structural impediments to promotion and tenure for women of color. And as it will shock absolutely no one, we continue to face racism within all spheres of job, our work. So we do see attrition as we go up. In law practice, depending on sort of what context, again, you're looking at, if you're thinking about sort of firm practice, we see the same issue arising. We see lots of women coming into firm practice. Early on, we've had repeated ABA reports on this. Entering associate classes at big law, for instance, 40 to 50% women. But as we go up the chain, we get, in 2018, only 20% are equity partners. So you see the drop off in retention of women in as they go up the ranks. And for women of color, it's even worse. It's I think it's like 2% of equity partners are minority women. I mean, that is an astonishingly small number, and it's just a handful of women. And the reasons why we are losing women of color as they go up the ranks is for the intersectional biases that they face. And it's not, it's simply the structure of law firms and their opportunities. And so there's a number of reasons why women of color give for leaving law practice. Almost all of them who have been polled have thought about leaving law practice. That's a shame. We're losing a lot of talent. So in terms of representations, like as I said, the short answer is that as you look at the first sort of layer of law practice, the first couple of years, maybe first 3 years, you see a fair number of women practicing, and then you see sort of them dropping out. And that's really the moment of concern, is trying to keep women in law practice over the length of a career. Right? And where are we losing the talent? Where are they going? If they're going in-house from big law, I'm not worried, because they're still practicing, right? But if they're leaving law practice entirely, that's a different matter altogether.
Thank you. All right, so the third question for this first set is to Professor Abou-Khadir, and it is, do you believe women lawyers' expectations changed in the past years?
This is an interesting question, because I do believe expectations for women in law has changed over the past few years. And it actually connects with what Professor Chowdhury just finished saying. The opportunities were not there several years ago. And I think that because bigger firms now have divisions in their firms for diversity and inclusion, they're welcoming these opportunities. So in welcoming these opportunities, the expectations are higher. Women want these positions that they didn't have the opportunity to have in the past. So I think women put a lot more pressure on themselves. I'm speaking about myself in this example. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and then naturally expectations are higher. We want to be able to get those partnership tracks when we're hired. we want to make the same salaries that men associates are making, and we're still not there yet. We still make less than male associates to this day. So I think naturally, yes, in the past few years, expectations have changed.
Thank you. All right, so now we're moving into the second set of questions. So this question is for Kat. And have you seen more diversity in law school recently?
Yeah, like 100%. All I can really speak to is Berkeley's diversity initiatives. My incoming class, the class of 2023, 66%, I think, of our incoming class was female, which I think in higher education isn't entirely surprising to have a higher female population than a male population. However, 66% is pretty significant, especially for like a top 10 university. And I think we're also, over half of us are people of color, and we have like 20% who identify with the LGBTQ community. And so the next class, so the cycle that was just admitted, I think we've had the most admittance for Black students, and that for specific POCs, that's the one I know because I'm part of the Black community on campus. And I think in my school year, we had 41 kids who are attending Berkeley Law right now who identify as Black. Obviously, it was a larger number when you're talking about just people who are admitted. So I think there's definitely been a lot more diversity. It's been so easy to connect with diverse students at Berkeley, not only because there's so many of us, but because Berkeley really encourages you to interact with your own affinity groups in your community. And I think they've done a really good job being on Zoom, being able to have us connect via Zoom and still have that shared safe space for people who identify as a person of color. So I definitely see more diversity. And I think for, this next incoming class, there is 100 Black students who are admitted, which is significantly more than I think a lot of schools see. And Berkeley had like this trivia night with UC Hastings Black Student Organization. And Hastings was telling us that they have like maybe 9 Black students who are attending Hastings in their 1L year. So comparatively, Berkeley has so many more admits, could be a function of the selective processes and things of that nature, but there is a lot more diversity in law schools, which I think is great.
Thank you. This question is for Professor Chaudhry. What would you say some of the misconceptions about women in law are?
Well, we suffer from sort of similar kinds of stereotype threat that we have in the past. I mean, one ongoing one is that women are not ambitious. In fact, the poll numbers, and I am, as you can imagine, quite happy. I like evidence. When I say stuff, I want to make sure that I know that it's backed up with this. So this is part of the polling data that at least when it comes to minority women, 80% of Asian women, 80% of Black women in law practice are ambitious. They want to be promoted. They want to make partner. And so there's a conception that, women are not go-getters. They're not ambitious. And in fact, it's not at all true. They are very ambitious. The prevailing culture of law practice may not recognize their ambition, or it may penalize women for their ambition. One of the things that we continue to see is the downside of being vocally or visibly ambitious. So for women of color who are visibly ambitious, we get the aggressive, you're very aggressive, you're like, right, stepping out of line kind of thing. And we get sort of that, particularly for Black women who voice ambition, they're characterized as sort of like being overly pushy and aggressive. Asian women, on the other hand, are sort of, expected to not speak up at all, right? So these misconceptions have a sort of, are problematic because you're navigating between an expectation of a certain kind of stereotypical behavior and your own reality, which is that you want to get ahead and you want to be ambitious. So you have to figure out how to be ambitious and get ahead without necessarily triggering all the downside stereotypes, right? So that's one misconception. The other, I don't know that this is a misconception, but this is a problem, it's a structural problem within all workforces. And that is that, and this has become very, very obvious with COVID, and that is that women are the primary caretakers of children. And this is an issue that we continue to face with regards to women's progress and their success, that they are expected to take maternity leave, expected to do the home caregiving, etc. And they're also then penalized for that by being put on the mommy track, etc. But oddly, men who take paternity leave are also penalized. So we need to change our sort of how we manage the whole work-life balance. And we also need to figure out how to allow for people to take leave, etc., caretake their families without penalizing them. Again, from the survey data, we know that women of color, and particularly Black women, are much less likely to rely on outsourcing their childcare, more likely to have community responsibilities, etc. And so we have to be careful about sort of not doing a cookie cutter, one size fits all sort of solution to the work-life balance issue. But this is something that continues to happen. But if there was a misconception, I would say that the misconception, and that one that's been sort of promoted in some respects by, by some parts of our profession, is that it is only women who do the caretaking in their families. And in fact, we should actively dissuade people from propagating that misconception, because the more that men become involved in caretaking, the less likely it is that women will be the ones who fare poorly and are penalized for it. So I think that those are two that I can think of. There are probably many more.
Thank you. And the last question for Professor Aboukadir. From what have you experienced or seen, are women in the courtroom treated differently?
Absolutely, still to this day. I think that it heavily depends on what jurisdiction you are in. So I am speaking from experience in Florida, and very specifically Miami-Dade County, Broward County, Palm Beach County, and Monroe County. I do practice all over the state, but the majority of my cases are in South Florida. And 3 of the 4 attorneys in my office are women. So yes, in my experience, depending on the judge that we're in front of, we could be treated completely different from my male associate. Although I'm the owner and the managing partner, it doesn't matter. If I'm coming into a hearing with him and I'm just, supervising, making sure everything is correct, instead of, saying hello to me first, the judge will ultimately go to my associate first and then say, oh, I'm sorry, who are you in this case? So these things still happen. And last year we had, I'm giving a specific example again. Last year we had a heavily litigated guardianship case in Miami-Dade County. And this is not so much from a judge, but from an opposing counsel. So I think that the majority of the issues are counsel and not so much judges, because there is the judicial committee that supervises how judges treat attorneys. So I think that there's now this fear. And with everything that's going on today in the world, I think judges recognize that even if they feel this way, they're not going to openly state it. So they're trying to fix their actions. But with opposing counsels, the Florida Bar Grievance Committee is not something that they really worry about. So my experience my negative experiences have been more so with opposing counsels. I'll still get the honey or the sweeties. And it wouldn't bother me, and I know women would not be okay with me saying this, but this is my opinion. It wouldn't bother me if it's from, a good place. They're not saying it from a good place. They're saying it to be demeaning. And in the case that we had last year, I was co-counseling with a male attorney, and the opposing counsel refused to speak to me entirely. So anytime we had any calls, anytime we had any hearings, instead of, if I were speaking, he would respond to my male co-counsel, even if it was me speaking. So those are the things that still occur today. And the only way to really stop an opposing counsel from doing that is threatening to involve the bar or threatening to tell the judge. And, these are not things that you usually want to do, but that's, in reality, those are the only ways that they're going to learn their lessons, or this is going to continue forever. It's a personality issue, in my opinion. But then there's also, sorry, this just popped up in my head as well. When you go to North Florida, for example, I don't think that the fact that women have a certain dress code helps this either. I think that further makes it harder on women. I remember having a trial in, I believe it was Duval County, Jacksonville, and I wasn't allowed to go to court with pants. You have to wear a skirt, and if you're wearing a skirt, you also have to wear pantyhose. And that to me is absolutely ridiculous. And those, I'm sure that there's a dress code for men as well. They have to come in with a suit and a tie, but I just think that in today's day and age, those are things that don't help women. Those are things that need to change. Those are things that are demeaning.
Thank you. And I have one final question, and this is for all three speakers. What do you think could help to have a higher percentage of female attorneys?
I guess I'll start. I just think the most basic thing you could do is encourage anyone who wants to go to law school to go to law school. The whole application process, the idea of law school is incredibly daunting and scary, and it is a male-dominated profession, and it has been. And I think that can deter a lot of women from applying because they fear that they might not be adequate enough or smart enough to do it, or have whatever it is that they think they need to have when they go to law school. And I definitely had that feeling too. And I was lucky enough because my mom is an attorney, and she was so encouraging of me to go. And if it was an inkling of something I wanted to do, she just told me I had to do it. And I think that that's really important, is just encourage any woman who wants to go to law school, or any higher education for that matter, to do it. Because it is, because a lot of women aren't given that support, that you can just do it. You can just do what you want. You can just go to more school. So I think it's really important. And when my mom was in law school, she ended up just talking to my uncle's girlfriend at the time and telling her about law school. And that girl ended up going to law school because of my mom. So you really do see this chain reaction of women encouraging women to go to school. And just like my last little thing on this, when you're at law school as a woman, it's really scary. And you feel like you're not good enough because you are still surrounded, even though I said Berkeley's 66% women, you feel like every class you're in is like mostly male. And I think it's because they take up so much space, and they take up so much space even on Zoom. And that's pretty hard. We're little tiny boxes, and they still take up a lot of space. And it's because they're the first to raise their hand. They're the first to talk out of turn. They're the first to interrupt you when you're talking on Zoom. And when you're at school as a woman of color, you already feel less than. And when you have these men who are in school who are talking over you and belittling your opinion, or making you feel like you don't have anything important to say when they're just being louder, it's really discouraging. But something that really helped me was, so everyone in my family is a lawyer. My mom, my dad, my brother, and his girlfriend, they're all lawyers. So I came in with a lot of support. And my brother's girlfriend was telling me, look, the loudest person in the room isn't always the smartest. And that really hit me, because when I was in class, there was particularly men who would just talk and talk and talk. And I was like, oh my God, I must not know what's going on, because they have these crazy hypotheticals and they're, talking about something we're going to learn 2 weeks from now. And it's like, well, maybe they're doing that because they don't know what we're talking about now. And it's this thing where you can't compare yourself to people when you're learning, because we all learn differently. So even though like you feel like you're not there, you're 100% there. You're learning, you're doing the best you can. That's all we can ask for. And just encourage, if you know someone who's thinking about it, encourage them. They don't have to be a lawyer. They can be a professor. They can, be a consultant. They can do anything they want with a law degree. They can go into politics. Just encourage them to go and make them feel good about their decision.
So I think I'm next, and one of the things I will say about what you just said, Kat, is that, part of this is also on the professors. If you ever take a class with me, I don't tolerate much bullshit. If you are gonna like talk and talk and talk, I'll cut you off. And I actually tell people up front, I have a no narrative policy. If you go off on tangents, I will just tell you that you were off on a tangent and I'll cut you off. And so, the thing is that like one has to be conscious of the fact that there's a balance of power going on in your classrooms, and there's a balance of power going on in every sort of interaction that you have, right? Like Sama just described this what is a prototypical, I think it's a classic power play, right? Like where you don't talk to somebody or you ignore somebody. And it's a strategy, right, by which you are making yourself bigger than other people. And we are very used to seeing these kinds of behaviors. I think one of the things is that if you confront that in the classroom and you train people to not do this, that's part of the professional responsibility and part of the profession that I think that law professors need to be better at is essentially not allowing people to let their egos run away with them and to sort of do a lot of posturing in place of substantive thinking, right? It's not that you are actually doing good argumentation. You're just talking farce, as we would say in England, right? You're just blowing, you're just gassing. And the more people are allowed to do that, the more they think that is a good strategy. Like that is a good way to lawyer, right? Or like arguing unnecessarily, like being confrontational. One of my colleagues says that it's not an argument; it's a chess game, right? And it requires skill and thought, and not just this brash kind of power play that you try to do. And so this is the thing that we try, those of us who are conscious of it, try to instill in our students. In terms of the profession, I think that we need to address the very real concerns that take women out of law practice. If we want to maintain numbers of women in law practice, we need to address the culture of law practice in general. And we need to talk about what is on the minds of women attorneys. And we know what these things are. We know that they have caretaking commitments that can be very difficult to manage when you have high billable hours as well as, work-life issues. We need to mentor women, and that starts from law school onwards. And we need to mentor women properly and effectively. One of the things that we don't do well enough is pair women with powerful mentors, not just any mentor, but powerful mentors who are able to advocate for them. So it's not just a mentor who is going to make you feel better, but somebody who's actually going to speak up for you as well when that's necessary. Mentors, I think, will keep you in the profession. If you are, and this is true about law school as well. And in the first year, a lot of my students, have these crises of confidence. And I know from my own law school experience, after the first semester, I was like, I told my spouse, I'm out. I am out. This is really, I can't do this. It is absolutely horrible. I hadn't even taken exams, and it was just like, it's so excruciating. And you feel exactly like that. You cannot succeed. After my first set of exams, I was like, oh, I've just, nailed it. And I'm actually doing pretty well. So I'm going to stay in. But the thing is, at that point, when you're about to quit, if you have people around you, Kat had a whole family of lawyers she could count on, but not everybody has that. If you have law professors and other and attorneys, if you're in the job, who can talk you through your whatever crisis you're going through, keep you in it, that makes all the difference in the world. And it's nothing that you're going through is nothing that people haven't gone through before. I mean, just think about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Right? And and the last thing I would say is, if you are in that position of having a crisis of confidence, imagine one really useless male attorney that you know. Really, and think about their confidence and their attitude and the fact that they have no idea that they're useless. And remind yourself that if they're in it, then so can you be, and stay in. Picture that one person.
That's very good advice. Just to recap, so the question is, what do you think could help to have higher percentage of female attorneys? And Professor Chaudhry just touched on one of my points, mentorship. I did not know what I wanted to do in life. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I changed my mind very last minute. I took the LSATs, I took the GRE, and I made a decision a week before law school started. And this is partly because I was lost. I went to FSU undergrad, and I was heavily involved in all sorts of organizations, but I still had no guidance in what I wanted to be. And this is a deeper conversation, because I think at 20 and 21 years old, it's very hard to choose what you want to do the rest of your life. I don't think that that's a fair age to decide the rest of your life, but it is what it is. So my mentorship actually started my first year of law school. And it was a male attorney in Miami, a Cuban attorney, heavily involved with all the judicial campaigns, prominent firm, and he held my hand to this day. I mean, he's still my mentor to this day. So a lot of my push and my drive has come from his advice, and other people as well. But if I could go back in time, I would have found a mentor in undergrad that would have, led me in the right direction and told me what the legal field would really be like. Law school is nothing like practicing either. It's completely two different worlds. So that mentorship is an extremely important part of it. And then the second thing I would say is mental health. So it's also part of my practice area, but I think that we have a problem communicating that we suffer from depression, anxiety, stress, anything mental health related, because there's this stigma that if you come out and say, as a woman or as a man, but I think it's harder on women, that you're not going to be as capable as a man, especially with what Professor Chaudhry has said earlier. You have all the responsibility of the household in a conservative relationship. So, and in a traditional society. So I think that it's just harder for women to come out and say, I suffer from X, Y, and Z, and I don't know if being a lawyer is the right fit for me if I'm going to have to be going through all of these things. It's not something that's discussed. And I think that it's something that we actually have to establish as lawyers. We have a mental health section of the Florida Bar, but I think that we need different resources in undergrad, as well as in law school, as well as when you graduate from law school, to really understand what it's going to be like.
Thank you so much for all of your responses. So now we're gonna open the floor to anyone that has any questions. You can type it in the chat box or you can just say it out loud.
I actually have a question. This is for Bukadir. So when you were talking about your experiences with the judicial courts and like you going to court and you felt like very discriminated against because of your gender, did this ever change your view of the judges themselves or like the judicial system in itself?
Yes. And it's hard because once you're in probate and in family, it's the same judges. They alternate every couple of years depending on what happens, elections, appointments, all sorts of things. But your cases stay with those judges. So your reputation is everything. So you can't openly state that you're disappointed in the judge's actions because it's going to affect your client. And you always have to remember that your feelings do not need to come out. You have a job to do, and your clients are your priority. So just because a judge slights you, you also don't want your client to suffer. So yes, it is something that anytime I'm in front of a specific judge, it will always stay with me. It will be in the back of my head, and I have to be very cautious with the things I'm saying so that it doesn't negatively affect my clients.
Gotcha. I mean, I'm actually, I don't know why it's echoey. Well, I'm actually really baffled at the responses that everyone has gave. I really didn't understand the underrepresentation of women in court at all. And I thought that it actually would have gotten a lot better, but it seems like we're still in that constant problem where women are still getting discriminated against because of our gender. And, like it makes me want to look out to more resources to find maybe if there is something we can add to our school systems, if there's anything we can do to talk about this issue, because like it was mentioned earlier, this is a conversation that we have to keep going, not just for lawyers but for everyone, for women in STEM in general. And I'm really happy that we're having this conversation now, because I think it's very important to open up the minds to those that weren't really aware of this situation before. So yeah, that's it for
I'm
my.
also, I'm also going to add something to my answer. Um, we can't change people, right? You can only lead people and you can direct them in the areas that they need to learn more and educate themselves. So I think a big part of this as well is educating the judiciary, educating male and female attorneys, and just having different programs so that they're aware, because everyone's experiences are different. So if a judge calls me sweetie or honey, I'm not going to say anything. I mean, it is what it is, right? But there are programs that, the judiciary puts on where they're starting to talk about these things, where they educate attorneys, judges, male and female, because female judges also call you honey or sweetie, right? So they're starting to educate them. And I think they have been for the past couple of years, because these weren't issues before and they are issues now. So in my opinion, education is the only way to be able to change these things.
Gotcha. I mean, I think that, oh my gosh, I don't know what's up with this echo on Zoom. Um, I think that you're 100% correct on that, and I want to actually maybe see if we can start implementing some sort of education for undergrad. I don't know how, but I maybe can think of something, but I think that it's definitely something that needs to be talked about more. I think I just have like a question for everyone in general. When you were studying law, did you know exactly what field you wanted to do, or were you just kind of like, okay, this is what I like, this is where I'm going? This goes out
Yeah,
to
I
you.
actually did. I went in with the view that I was going to be a transactional lawyer, somebody who was in corporate practice, which I went in, I did that, I came out doing that, discovered I actually hated practicing. corporate finance because of the time that I was practicing it. Um, I was representing Morgan Stanley and Wells Fargo, the big Barclays Bank, big banks. And if you know any, if for those people who knew me well, they were like, "What are you doing? This is like so not like you. You have the social justice thing about you that your undergrad is like religion and feminism and political science and you know this is like making money for people who already have a lot of money is like not the thing that we would have imagined you to do. And of course, if I wish they told me that before I went into all of this, right, that would have been helpful, but they didn't. So I found out for myself that it was like, after the fact that, gosh, this is not the way that I want to live my life. So, I mean, I think that there's an upside to Sama's dilemma of like not knowing what you're going to do and finding out, um, because that allows you to do a little bit of thinking while you are sort of learning, right? And you see the downside of knowing like exactly what you're going to do and going for it and then realizing, oh my God, this is ghastly, right? Like, I mean, and the thing is that that's absolutely true. What you learn, what you're doing in law school is very cerebral. It's a lot of, you're doing a lot of abstract thinking, and it's a lot of theory work, and it's not necessarily the bread and butter work. It's not the bread and butter work of corporate finance, which is staying up until 2 a.m. in the morning doing document review and doing offer documents. That's very boring and can be very soul killing, right? So that doesn't help, right? That disconnect doesn't help, because in law school you may not get an adequate understanding of what it is that you're gonna practice. On the litigation side, I think it's a little bit easier, right? If you're doing trial ad and sort of appellate advocacy, etc., you're getting more skills-based training, which is easier than the transactional side, which is which you really don't do much of in law school from a real practical perspective. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Kat, do you want to go?
Yeah. So I also came into law school. Well, I actually finished undergrad knowing, like, not having any idea what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I also thought that being 21 years old was a little unfair for me to have to choose immediately what I wanted to do. And so I ended up taking a gap year, and I just worked on myself and worked in Los Angeles and like figured out what I wanted to do. And I've always had a passion for social justice and racial equality. And I think that that was the reason what like led me to apply to law school, was to try to make some sort of change on any level. And I knew I had to go to law school to do that. I wrote my whole personal statement about wanting, to reform drug policy and get rid of mandatory minimums and, change 3 strikes and all these things. And while that stuff is really important, once you come into law school, you're like shoved in a washing machine and you're like thrown around, and you're introduced to like all these different subjects. And then some of them are really interesting and some of them are really boring. And then you're also like fed this idea of what it would be like to work at a firm. And you all of a sudden start to realize that you've racked up tens of thousands of dollars in debt in 10 weeks. And you're like, oh my God, I need to go to a firm to pay this off. And you're hit with so many things at once. And it makes it really hard to either stay with what you wanted to do when you came in or have a good understanding. And I think it's so normal to not know what you want to do. I have no idea. And I thought I would, know exactly what I wanted to do. And with my brother and both of my parents, they all wanted to do a different type of law when they were in law school, and now they're doing something different. And I think that what is kind of reassuring is that when you're in law school, you're learning the law. Of course, you're in law school, but once you like start your job, that's when you'll learn everything you really need to know. And it kind of gives you this freedom to explore what you want and not have to feel tied to anything. And I think that I've really benefited from not knowing precisely what kind of law I want to do. I knew I needed a law degree, but I don't know what I want to do. And it's definitely opened my eyes to a whole, plethora of subjects that I never thought that I would, give the time or day to. Like, I ended up loving contracts, and people hate contracts usually their first year. And I ended up hating torts, and people love torts their first year. So it's like, it all depends, but don't feel like you have to know exactly what you want to do. Life will, throw you a curveball always. So if you know, that's amazing. And if you don't, that's great too. Like, you're fine.
For me, I clearly didn't know what I wanted to do, even getting into law school. But I started working my first year, and I worked through law school. And because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I knew that I wanted to do something with human rights, international human rights. I'm Palestinian. In undergrad, I did refugee trips where I went to refugee camps in the West Bank in Palestine. So I knew that that was what my passion was, and I wanted to do something related to that. So in law school, my goal was to try to intern or work in as many different areas to see what I would like and what I would dislike, because it's extremely difficult to get jobs in the international humanitarian world. So that was my goal, but then I did all sorts of stuff. I did the immigration clinic. I worked for a criminal defense attorney. I applied to work at the public defender's office. I did international intellectual property in DC for a summer. I can't remember. I worked at a probate firm my last semester of law school at the same time that I was working for Professor Chowdhury. And I actually ended up quitting from Professor Chowdhury. I don't know if she remembers this, because the probate firm needed more hours, and I was interning for the administrative probate judge. So I was taking 18 credit hours, interning for the judge like 3 days a week. And then one of the partners of the firm saw me in court and said, I want you to also clerk at my firm and then potentially have a job after law school. So I did the probate thing my last semester, and it just kind of fell in my hand. After I took the bar and I passed that summer, they immediately told me, not even after I passed, after I took the bar exam, they said, we need you the following Monday. So I've been working since the weekend after the bar exam. And I've been doing probate since then. And I said I would never do family law. And
Words, famous last words.
this is why you never say never, right?
You didn't take family law in school.
I didn't take it. I didn't take family law because I'm like, even if it's on the bar, I'll teach myself from the bar, and I'm never going to practice it. So it is what it is. But I ended up working for a firm that practiced probate and family, and I learned and eventually just decided that, a lot of people are in need. And this is an area that I know I can do better than most family practitioners. And I can stand out. I am a minority. My firm is diverse, and I know that we can do a good job for clients, even if the area of law was not what I imagined for myself. So yes, moral of the story is never say never. Try to intern and try to get experience. Go into court. Judges love for you to, it's open door policy. You can sit in a courtroom and watch a civil trial. You can watch a criminal trial. You can watch a probate trial. I mean, these are all things that are free to the public.
Yeah, and I will say is that family law generates more money than almost any other area of practice.
That's thank you for pointing that out. That was partly why I decided to open my firm and do family law.
Incredibly large,
It's lucrative
practice area that most people don't really know that it is. But I will also say is that there's a ton of shitty family lawyers out there. Some not being one of them. But so it's important if you do get into it to do it well, because it's very, very, it can be very extremely depressing area of law. And so if you don't do well in it, and people, real people, we're not talking about, Goldman Sachs losing 50 million. We're talking about people losing their their kids.
Kids.
And that's real.
And to add to that, you also need to decide whether you want to do something emotionally charging, right? So when people ask what I do, I say I do death and divorce. Obviously, we do much more than that, right? But those are the two areas that we get the most business in. So, and those aren't pleasant areas. They're depressing. Clients aren't calling happy. They're calling because someone died, or they're getting divorced from their spouse, or they have a child custody issue. So it also takes a certain personality to be able to deal with those people's problems versus, for example, a real estate attorney, right? You're not dealing with someone's children. Yes, it could be emotionally, taxing, but in a different way. You're dealing with people's money there. There can be mistakes made, but it's not a child, it's not a spouse, it's not a death. So that's also something to think about in law school. Whether you want something that transactional litigation, something that affects people emotionally, those are different things to think about.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a lot of response to that question. But I appreciate it so much from everybody's end. It is 4:30, so I'm not sure if you guys have to go. But thank you so much for your responses. And, like, I have to say, I am pretty inspired by all of you. And I myself have been on the bridge of wondering if law school is for me. And I keep going back and forth to my dad, and it's driving him insane. And he's like, Sabrina, make a stupid decision. Do you want it or not? So I think that everybody's responses today kind of like gave me a little bit of emotion to go. So thank you for the inspiration. I appreciate it. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for your time. If anybody else has any questions, you guys feel free. But on my part, I'm all good.
Any last questions? I'm happy to stick around for a couple more minutes if there's anybody else who wants anything answered. I think we're done.
Thank you all. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Good luck for those of you still deciding. Good to
Thank you
see
so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.